And we're live. I think we're live. I hope we're live. It's counting down, so let's say we are. Hi, my name is Claire Kann. I am the author of this book, Let's Talk About Love, and this book, If It Makes You Happy. And I'm going to talk about what it's like being a slow writer where you're in an industry where they expect you to have, or at least publish, one book a year, which for some of us is kind of impossible, and we just can do our best. So just going to talk a little bit about myself first. So I am a late in life writer. I went to college late, decided I wanted to work and have fun first. And then I went to college and I decided I was going to be a writer after I took a creative writing class. And the class was really receptive to my minimal amount of skill. I think it just really responded well to my storytelling ability. And that night I decided that was it for me. I'm gonna go ahead and change it. So I graduated in December of 2013, and I started writing my first book on January 1st, 2014. That year, I wrote 4 novels and 1 novella. I tried to get an agent, and then I failed. No one wanted to represent me. In 2015, I wrote 3 more novels. Tried to get an agent again, failed some more. And then at the end of 2015, I revised one of the 3 novels that I wrote earlier that year, and that took me into 2016. And 2016 was my big writing year. I submitted one of my novels to Swoon Reads, which is an online platform where you can submit your unpublished YA manuscript. And there's like a community of writers. We read each other's books and just left comments. And then Swoon Reads is actually attached to Firewall and Friends, which is an imprint of Macmillan. So the editors there go through the submissions, and they have 3 submission periods. And so maybe they'll pick 2 to 5 books every submission period for traditional publication. My book was picked in 2016. That year, I also started serializing a couple of my stories on Wattpad, and things went well for me that year as well. I won a Wattie Award, which is Wattpad's awards that they give out once a year. I became a Wattpad star, which means my books automatically got featured on the site. And then it was just a really great year. And then that's when things really started to slow down for me. I had written 7 books in 2 years, achieved publication, or on the path to publication, and it was like my spirit just dried up. Like I was done. And so I feel like I really became a slow writer because of burnout. I spent the rest of 2016 into 2017 revising my debut novel, which was several rounds of intensive revision with my editor. And I had to then deal with the fact that I was going to debut. So I was basically petrified of the idea petrified by the idea that I was going to be a published author, even though that's what I spent the past 2 years working for. So just to be clear, like that was always my goal. I always wanted to be I wanted to be published. So from the time I decided I'm going to be a writer, I knew I was going to be published and nothing was going to stop me. And then I achieved it. And so I had debut pressure. I achieved my dreams. Now what pressure? And now I don't have any more books inside of me pressure. So my book came out in 2018, and I didn't write anything new unless I had to. Like I was pretty much done. I continued to serialize 1 book on Wattpad because the culture there is you have readers expecting you to update once a week or twice a week, or just keep the story going. So I had to do that. I had to fulfill my option for my contract. So I had to, for my published works contract with my publisher. Wow, that sentence. What happened with that sentence? Good Lord. I had to fulfill my option, and I ended up writing this book in 4 months from beginning to end because I had to, and that included revisions and getting copy edit and line edit and all that good stuff. And then it released in 2019, and that's still kind of been it for me. I have not written anything new. And because of that, I do not have a book coming out in 2020. I had to skip a year because I couldn't fulfill my obligations on time. So now we're still working on my third book with my publisher, Swoon Reads. I'm still there. And my book is set to come out in 2021 if I'm able to get my life together. And during the time that I was struggling so much, I had to really look at myself and realize that, I'm a slow writer now. It takes me a very long time to come up with an idea, to process that idea, to write that idea down into something that could potentially be publishable. I can't, produce a book a year anymore, or several drafts of a book a year anymore. I can't produce a published book in a year anymore. And maybe that'll change in the future, but for right now, that's where I'm at. And I've come up with quite a few coping skills and mechanisms to help me to get me through and keep my career going. So there are a couple of questions. I'm just going to read the first question now. So how can I keep readers engaged with my writing career when it might be a long time before I have another novel to offer? Well, I guess it depends on what kind of person you are. So if you are social media savvy and you use Twitter, that's probably the easiest way. A lot of the times now, personality sells books. People will buy your books just because they like you as a human being. If you make them laugh, if they're engaged with you, if they follow you on Twitter, Instagram, if you make YouTube videos, if you have a YouTube following, that's what they care about. In my case, I use Wattpad. I can take like a month-long break. And when I come back, my readers will say, welcome back. We can't wait to see what else you have. Like my follower count doesn't go down. They know eventually I'll come back. It's all about just communicating why you're unable to have another novel out. And sometimes that is writer burnout, and that because you're a slow writer, sometimes that's the industry. Once you've sold a book, you don't control when it comes out. So maybe you're ready, but publishing is slow. So you sell a book in 2019, it doesn't come out to 2022. And so it's just really about coming up with a strategy that works for you. And just social media is probably like the easiest way. I could also recommend like newsletters. A lot of writers now use newsletters to keep in touch with their audience. Once a month is usually all it takes. Have a section about you and your life, how things are going, how your writing's going, what you're currently reading, as well as maybe what kinds of what's going on in the industry if you take it that far. A couple of writers that I know have really great newsletters would be Alexandra Bracken. I really like hers. Susan Dennard, Adrienne Young. And these are all like YA writers as well. So you can see how they structure their newsletters and how they engage with their audience. Okay, second question. I worry that my agent will lose faith or interest in me if I can't churn out a new manuscript every year. Do you have any tips for dealing with these feelings? So I can't speak on the author-agent relationship because I sort of took a backdoor into publishing with Swoon Reads. It's not required to have an agent to get published. I just submitted to the site and they decided, hey, we want to publish this. But I can speak to what it's like to be under contract and not be able to produce your draft on time. So that does happen. You obviously, the first thing would be to ask for an extension. And then if you get to the point where you are continually asking for extensions, I think it's time to have a serious talk with them to discuss why you're unable to produce your draft or your next novel. For me, I was very open. The way my season was set up, my drafts were usually due in winter, and I have seasonal affective disorder, so I'm just in straight depression. Like I can't do anything. I can barely get up and go to work. And so I just let them know that like it's very hard for me to produce creative work in the winter now. And so I ended up getting shifted to summer. So sometimes when you just ask and you're just honest, your editor or your agent can be accommodating, but if they can't help you if they don't know. And sometimes asking for help can be very hard, especially in this day and age. And with my generation, we don't like to ask for help, but we kind of have to, especially if you're going to be in an industry that works like clockwork. It's very slow clockwork, but it is clockwork. You know, if you turn something in late, that affects sales, that affects marketing. You know, everyone's counting on you to produce your work on time. And if you can't do that, you have to. In extreme cases, sometimes they'll have to push your date back. So that's what happened to me, is my book got pushed back because I was unable to meet my deadlines. And they were very kind about it. But that still put pressure on me to know, like, okay, I have one extension. So now I need to figure out how I can produce a work that I'm proud of without having to keep asking for more extensions this time. Like, I need to start producing work. Now, one method I did was partials. If I felt like the work I was producing wasn't good, I'm very hard on myself. And I know that I'm hard on myself. I'll ask my editor if she's willing to read 25 pages and let me know if I'm going in the right direction. And that's what I recently did. I turned in my first 50,000 words and an outline for the rest. And I got feedback on that. And I was able to incorporate that into the revisions that I'm doing now. So ultimately, what it boils down to is just be open and be honest about needing more time. And if you're in a relationship with your agent and you feel like you can't say those things to them, it might be time to reevaluate that relationship. It's a business partnership. You should be able to talk to them about when things are not going well. They're not necessarily going to drop you. And if they do drop you, that's just one agent. There are literal hundreds of agents in this industry. And if you're willing to work hard and continue at your craft, and if this work truly means something to you, you will find another path to publication. You know, the buck doesn't stop with just one agent. Okay, question 3. How do you keep, did I skip one? Yes, 3, sorry. How do you keep comparison or jealousy in check when cheering for writing friends who are faster to reach the successes that we want to? That's an excellent question. So I know for me, I don't really experience jealousy because that's their path and those are their blessings that are coming to them. When it's my time, it'll be my time. I think one thing that's important to realize is, like, publishing isn't going anywhere. And once you've realized that publishing is not going anywhere and you're still writing your book, you can still query it 5 years later. You know, I don't feel like I'm ever running out of time. And I think that's the crux of the issue, is like, if you're not writing fast enough, you're going to miss out on, the werewolf, phase in publishing, and you're writing a werewolf book. But you have to understand, publishing works on a 2-year delay. So if all these werewolf books are coming out now, and that's what you're writing, and you're worrying that it's becoming saturated, those books sold 2 years ago. So by the time you're ready, werewolves will be back in style. Pretty firm example, like Twilight, vampires, right? So those books sold in 2005. Gotta brush up on my Twilight lore. I think they sold in like 2005, and it was Vampire Central in publishing for about 5 to 10 years, right? And they're just now coming back in 2020. So publishing is cyclical. There will always be time. In terms of, like, when it comes to when the connection is personal and it's your friends, I would really investigate your own feelings of why you cannot, or why you feel like you can't be happy for this person. Because I know for me, it's very possible for me to be happy that someone else has got a deal and then be upset for myself because I don't have the deal. So as long as there's that balance, I know I'm okay. You can be happy for someone else and sad for yourself. If it's just a one-way street where I just don't want this person to have this thing and I feel like it should be mine, that's a me problem. That's not their fault. That's me. And then I need to do some soul searching to figure out how and why I'm feeling that way. Because chances are it's not because I didn't get the deal and they did. It's something else is going on. And I'm deflecting onto them, which isn't fair, especially if they're your friend. So always just be mindful of your own emotions before projecting outward. Okay, question 4. Do you have any recommendations for speeding up the writing process a little? That's a good question too. I think, well, I know what I've heard. So I've heard sprinting helps, where you just set a timer for 15, 20 minutes, and then you write as many words as you possibly can in that 20 minutes, and then you just keep doing that, for like an hour or 2 hours, and then boom, you made your 500 words for the day. That doesn't work for everybody. Sorry, my nose itches. Work for everybody. For example, that doesn't work for me because I like to line edit as I go. Like sentence structure is very important to me, even in the beginning when I'm drafting. So instead of having a daily word count goal, I started tracking my time. So I got off work, go home, ready to start my writing. I clock in. I actually use a program called T-Sheets. It's free if you just have one user. Myself, I'm self-employed, so I just do one user, me. I clock in, I start at 7 o'clock, and then I just write. I just sit at my computer and I write, and sometimes that means I'll open Twitter. Sometimes that means I'll have to Google a joke just to make sure that, or Google the specifics of a joke to make sure I can make that joke. But I'm still writing, I'm still thinking, I'm still going, and I'll just track my time. And at the end of the week, I'll look at how much time I spent. Let's say I spent 20 hours working. From Sunday to Saturday. And if I only have 500 words to show for those 20 hours, that's a problem. So when I go into the next week, I tell myself, okay, no Twitter. I block Twitter. And then I'll do another 20 hours. If I have 3,000 words, okay, so obviously I know Twitter is a problem for me. I can't go on Twitter if I want to produce my words. So just find a way to limit your distractions first. And then seeing the amount of hours you have versus the amount of words will really put things in check for you, like really quick, because then you feel like you're wasting your life, and no one wants to feel like that, right? So just that's what I do. That's like the biggest thing I do is just start looking at the time versus output, and that tends to get me into gear. Another trick that I know someone else uses is I make self-deadlines. So I say I want to have my draft finished by the 31st. But the thing is, I'm my own boss and I love me and I'm very easy on myself. So if I don't turn it in on 31st, who's going to know? Me. That's not going to help anybody. So I make deals with my friends. So I'll tell them like, hey, I'm going to have a draft for you, or I'm going to have a partial for you on the 31st. If I don't send it to you by 11:59 p.m. on the 31st, drag me, like yell at me in DMs, yell at me in the text, do what you need to do, bully me into turning in something. And typically, I don't really have CPs. I have people who read my book and they let me know their thoughts. Like, is it working? And typically, if they can just say, hey, this is really great, where's the rest? That's enough to get me going again. Sometimes I just fall out of love with what I'm doing because I reread it so many times as I'm writing it. But getting that outside perspective like rejuvenates me. I need someone to tell me that I'm doing a good job. I want my gold star. I need my A+. And I am just very lucky to have found friends who are willing to do that for me. And it's very easy. There's a lot of avenues to find CPs. I know a lot of people find them on like Twitter, and there's Facebook groups as well. Lots of forums that you can join. And when you're looking for a CP, try first just send like a sample, like a 5 to 10 page sample, exchange sample, just to make sure that your writing styles or your editing styles feel similar enough that like you'll be comfortable sharing your work, because you don't want to give someone your work who's going to just like tear it to pieces and just destroy your spirit. You have to eventually learn to trust this person. And so it'll take some time. I think it took me maybe 6 months to ask one of my writing friends to actually like start looking over things and hold me accountable. But we're still friends, even though we've been reviewing each other's work for 4 years now. I think it's 4 years. I met them through Swoon Reads in 2015. 5 years. Oh my gosh, it's been so long. I have no concept of time. So yeah, so I've had the same readers for like 5 years now. So very possible. There's lots of different avenues to help you speed up. Okay. Question 5. Do you think it would be possible to get contracted for a series, even if it might take me a long time to finish? They actually had like I think 4 or 5 O's in that. That's really cool. So I guess it depends. If you're talking about traditional publishing, I think it might be hard to sell a series in general. So when you submit your first book, the recommendation is to create it as a standalone. And when you query, you would say, this is a standalone novel with series potential. Because if they know up front that you want 8 books, they're going to tell you, no, you can have 1 book, or no, you can have nothing. So always make sure your first book can be a standalone. I know a really popular example I like is An Ember in the Ashes by Saba Tahir. That was a standalone. They made her change it into a standalone, and now it's a 4-book series because it did so well. So it's all really going to depend on that first book. So focus on your first book, getting that polished up and ready to go, sell it as a standalone with series potential, and then see where that gets you. And then if you get to the point where your book publishes, right, stars align, it's doing well, they want a second book in the same world, then that's when you start talking about and negotiating to do a series. And then just communicate that, like, hey, I'm not George R.R. Martin levels of slow, but I'm going to need some time. What is a 2-year schedule, or can I do a 1.5 years? Another popular example is Tomi Adeyemi. There was a 18-month delay in between her books, as opposed to like the 12-month delay. So it's possible for things to get pushed back to give you more time to finish your series, as long as you communicate that up front. Just say, I'm slow. I'm a very slow writer. I need time to think through my world. Is it possible to have an 18-month release schedule or a 24-month release schedule? And it really, again, it does depend on like how well your books do. And I'm rooting for you. It's going to be amazing. Okay, so we have a few questions from Kira. Okay, are agents and editors willing to work with slow writers? Yes, I would say absolutely yes. That has been my experience. Again, just be open and honest about what you can do. So it's much better to say, like, okay, it's going to take me 6 months to do this revision, than to say it's going to take me 2 months. And then at the end of those 2 months, you say, can I turn it in 3 months, at the 3-month mark? How about 4 months? How about 5 months? I will have it to you at the end of the 7th month. I swear. Like, that starts to look bad. I'm speaking from experience. Don't do what I did. Just tell them it's going to take me this amount of time, and then ask them for their opinion. If it takes me longer than the 6 months, what are my options, or what do you think we can do it? And most of the time they'll just say, like, okay, that's fine. Let's talk about it. And you come up with a schedule. And the important thing is just sticking to the schedule. Like, know your limits, try to estimate. And if anything goes wrong, communicate that as soon as possible, because they have schedules too. So if they're counting on you to turn something in on the 31st, and they think it's coming in the morning of the 31st, and they have it on their calendar to read that day, if you don't turn it in, they can't do their work. So that's like the other side of things. It's just be mindful of their schedules as well. Everyone just be in communication and keep a close eye on what's actually going on. Okay, how do you manage deadlines as someone who works slower than others? Communication. I just really communicate with my editor and let her know, I think I can do it by this day. And then one thing we're doing now is we check in on the first of the month. So for example, if I get an edit letter on February 1st, instead of just saying, when do you think you can have it back in, she'll just say, let's check in March 1st. Like, that'll be our check-in day. And then we'll see where you're at. And same thing, let's check in April 1st. And if I have anything to tell her in that 30-day period, I'll send an email. So if it's the 15th and I know I only have 2 chapters to go and I just want to read through it one more time, I'll let her know she'll have it in 7 days. So that way she can put it on her calendar and expect it. And as long as we adhere to those deadlines, I adhere to those deadlines, and I am just really cognizant of, like, if I can actually make that deadline or not, and I'm not lying to myself, everything's fine. Okay. How do you market when you have a new book so that you can regain your audience's interest? Well, I'm not a marketer, so that I'm in the camp that I don't feel like authors should be marketers. I write books. It is marketing and sales job to sell my book and make it sound appealing. What I do on social media is I sell myself. I'm pretty dry. I think I'm funny. I might not be. I don't know. I laugh at my jokes, so it's good enough for me. And then I'm just really open about when I'm writing. So I like to use Instagram stories where I'll give like writing updates. I like to I'll share what song I was listening to for the session. So I have a day job, and so I write at night, and I call them midnight writing sessions. And so I'll say like the midnight song of the day, because it's not really day. And then tell them what the song is. And sometimes I'll post like an excerpt, like my favorite line of the day. It's a little more structured if you use like a blog. You can do it on Tumblr, which I hear is still really popular. I don't know how. But you can have that format. Be like how many words you wrote in a day. If that doesn't give you anxiety, you can just share how many words you wrote, what your favorite line is, what song you were listening to, things you had to Google. I love doing that. So I'm writing a mystery now, and it has a lot of pop culture references. So I'll pick 3 of the most obscure things I had to Google, and I'll list those. And then in my replies, people will ask me questions like, how do these 3 things fit in? Like, what's going on? And then I can engage and talk about it. Instead of answering quietly in the DMs, I post that to my story so everyone can see the answer. And then from that spawns more questions. And then we just have a dialogue about what I'm working on. If you're not into social media and social strategy, I wouldn't say it's impossible, but it's definitely going to be an uphill battle. If you're writing for the middle grade set, it's a little different because you can do middle grade school visits if you are into public speaking. Those are really easy to schedule in your area or even out of your area if you're willing to, go as far as you can. But with YA, if it's important to you to reach out to your readers, you probably definitely need to be on social media. One of the early things I did is I decided to use Wattpad because I wasn't comfortable putting my personality online a couple years ago. I thought my writing was what was important. I wanted to be known as a writer and not necessarily an entertainer. And so I picked a story that I knew traditional publishing would not want. I queried it. I had got, 15 to 20 rejections. Swin Reads didn't want it. I posted on that site. It looked like no one enjoyed the story but me. So I started uploading it to Wattpad, just, 1 to 2 chapters a week. I would do a couple of Instagram promo posts where I would pick a quote and make a little photo set to go along with it. And then tell them the link was in my bio, go read my story on Wattpad. And that was the easiest way to engage readers because once I sold a book, I was able to tell them, I have 9,000 followers or something like that. Immediately hey, I have a new book coming out, or hey, can you vote for me in this contest? I don't think it was Everease. It was something where you could actually see the poll, an online poll, and you could see the jump. I remember telling my Wattpad readers that one of my books was up for a competition, and you could see in real time how fast my book shot up to the top of the poll because they voted for me. So just find what works for you. It could be Wattpad, it could be social media, but that's just the best way to stay in touch with your readers. Either stay in touch or just if you lose touch, reconnect. Okay, question 7. I'm a really slow writer, and I worry that by the time I finish my current manuscript, the book market will have changed and my agent won't be able to sell it. How can I deal with this fear? I would recommend making friends with it. You're going to have to make your peace with the fact that publishing moves slow fast. So if let's say use my werewolves again. If your book is about werewolves and you notice that a bunch of werewolf books are selling in Publishers Marketplace. We're not talking about published books, but actually you can see the deals for werewolf books, and it's coming. There are a lot in a short amount of time. Your book probably will not sell, this year, and that's okay. The best advice you can give to a writer is to keep writing your next book. So if that book doesn't sell, you need to write another book. Finish what you're working on if your heart's in it. Polish it up, have it done, shelve it. Work on your next book to sell. because I can guarantee you in 3 to 5 years after the werewolf books have come out and people have calmed down and the market begins to breathe again, it'll say, hey, you know what we really like? Werewolf books. And then your agent will start getting those notices. You'll start seeing it on the manuscript wish list on Twitter. And then what do you know? You have a shiny werewolf book ready to go immediately on submission. So just go over it, make sure that all your references are still up to date. Because if you're writing a book set in 2016, you might want to update it so that it's actually like 2021 when it's ready to be published. So you don't want to have anything too outdated in it. And then just go on submission and your book will probably be one of the first ones to sell. Like nothing in publishing ever truly dies. You will always have a chance to make a comeback. And even if in that time you lost your agent, requery with that same werewolf book. People do it all the time. My book that comes out in 2021, I wrote it in 2015. And we're revising it now for publication then, for next year. So there will always be time. There will always be a need for your previous work. Just make sure it's completed and done and ready to go as soon as possible. And then in terms of the fear aspect, so I have generalized anxiety. I worry about everything at all times. Tonight, I'm probably going to, curl into a ball and sit in the dark because this is very stressful for me. I'm having a good time, but this is also very stressful. The way I deal with that is I acknowledge it. I know that doing events like this it's going to stress me out, but I'm going to do it anyway because it's my life and nothing's going to stop me. I know I'm a slow writer and I want to write this werewolf book and I'm going to do it anyway because nothing's going to stop me. It's okay. It is literally okay to be scared. The problem is when you let fear stop you. You can't stop. You have to keep going if you want to live the life that you want to live. So write your book. If it doesn't go anywhere, that's okay. Just save it. Write the next book. And when it's time, werewolves will come back. Okay, is there value to trying to co-author with another writer if I'm slow? Ooh. Or will that just make the process take longer? So co-writing is very difficult if you write at different speeds. So let's say your co-writer can do 50,000 words in 2 weeks. I just heard someone can actually do that and I cried a little because that's not my life. So if they can write 50,000 words in 2 weeks, they've written a whole book. And you've written probably 1 or 2 chapters. That's not going to make you feel good about yourself, like at all, right? So you really don't want to work with someone who is that fast. You would have to find someone who's more your speed. I personally think 2 slow writers co-writing together would be ideal because that way, if you're feeling insecure about your work, you write your 2 chapters and you don't think they're any good, give them to your partner, have your partner read them, and they'll tell you what they think, and hopefully it's something good. And they'll say, okay, well, I love these 2 chapters that you've written. Let me see what I can do. And then they write 2 chapters, and then you just go back and forth, and it doesn't matter how long that takes. As long as you guys are working together and you're moving forward together, I think it'll be fine. But it's just key to make sure that you write with someone who is either at a similar level to you or within reach. Like if they can write like 5 chapters a week and you can only do 2.5, that's only twice your speed. And eventually, hopefully you'll start meeting them, or they'll understand that you're never going to meet them, and then they'll slow down and just kind of keep things banked. It's just the ebb and flow. Co-writing definitely has to have an ebb and flow to it, but you definitely don't want to work with someone who can go like 10 times as fast as you can. I don't think even if there's 2 people writing, I don't think it'll make the process take longer. I really feel like there's this obsession with time. And I think that's in the zeitgeist in general, not just with publishing. We all feel like we are running out of time. Like if we don't sell our first book by the time we're like 21, 22, it's over for us. We're done. If I don't sell a book by the time I'm 30, I might as well just give up. That's not true. That's not true. Our culture, and I think just the world at large, rewards youth and really ambitious youngsters, and that's who you see to the forefront. But you actually don't see what they don't talk about is a lot of writers like myself. Like I was in my 30s. I'm still in my 30s, but I think I was 30 when I started writing, and I didn't sell my first book till I was like 30, 32. So it's okay to do things later in life. Once you get over that year 20 hump, it's all downhill until it's not, until you just stop buying into the lie. Like, you have plenty of time to do what you need to do. Because at the end of the day, the most important aspect of writing is you. If you're not happy with your work, if you're not happy with the way your career is going, you have the power to change that. Like, my motto is, I'm too old to be unhappy. I've done my own happiness. I was a teenager. I'm not going back. So if writing slowly is what you need to create the work that makes you feel good, write slowly. It's okay. Okay, question 9. Do you read as much as you did before and enjoy it the same way as before you were published? No. I can't even watch movies the same. I nitpick everything. But in order to be a writer, you do have to read. So you need to read within your genre and your age range. Okay, so I try to make a point to read at least one book a month. There are massive amounts of YA books are published every year. I have a wide selection of things that I can try to hopefully find and enjoy. And what ends up happening is, if I'm actively working on something, I read books that would be a comp to that. Like, for example, if I was writing a rom-com, I would read some books by Maureen Gu. Like hers, she follows the pattern very well for YA rom-coms. And then apply that to my own work. But in terms of just like reading for fun, I'm just now getting back into that. And in order to do that, I completely left the YA sphere. I don't really read YA books for enjoyment. I've been reading adult science fiction. My favorite author right now is Shannon McGuire. And she also writes as Mira Grant. Something about her books just makes me want to be creative again. And that's what I needed to find. Was the reason why I wasn't enjoying reading YA books is because I would compare their books to mine. And then once I compared the actual content of the books, I would begin to compare how it was received. Like, what marketing did they get versus what marketing did I get? Did they hit the list? I didn't hit the list. So what's going on here? I'm great. Why don't you love me? And that's just not a fair space to be in. So I had to leave the YA alone. And now that I've done that, I really enjoy adult books. I really enjoy middle grade because there's zero competition. There's zero temptation for me to go into that spiral of, why are they successful and I'm not? Because again, that's a me problem, and I had to fix it for myself. So what are some of the benefits of being a slow writer? I would say attention to detail. Because when you write slowly, and it's not just because you have writer's block, we're talking about your process is just slow because you're really thinking about your narrative and you're thinking about sense of structure and character development. Like, everything is constantly flowing not flowing, but percolating in your mind. You're always thinking about your book. You're just having a hard time getting what you see in your mind onto the page. I feel my books are a lot more richer than they were in the past, because before I would just kind of fast draft like every idea I had, and I had to get it out immediately, and then I'm like, okay, I'll just fix it later. And now it's like, no, I don't want to, quote unquote, waste my words. I want to make sure that what I'm doing is really representative of like my current skill level, and it's representative of like what I want to talk about. And that's something I'm really enjoying with the book I'm writing now. Is it's not just about my kids and going through plot A, B, C, D. It's about how much can I layer into this thoughtfully? What am I trying to say with this work? I'm definitely not a literary writer. My writing style is very commercial. I like it to be accessible. I am writing for children. I want them to have a good time, but I also want them to learn something. I was an English major, so I know what it's like to have to analyze a blue curtain for 2 pages of an essay, even though it's just a blue curtain. I'm not going that far, but I want to give them something to think on that's still fun. I want reading to be fun for them. And I feel like the longer I take, the more that kind of investment I can put into my books. Okay. Is it smarter to write for younger readers, like picture books, or middle grade if I'm slow as molasses? I love that phrasing. I I would say no, because those books are still hard. Writing is hard. It doesn't matter what age group or what style you're writing in. Writing is hard. And writing is rewriting, and it takes a lot of time. Really great picture books are a skill. It's not just rhyming. It's also you're telling a very short story in a very visual way, and it's not about the amount of words, it's the impact of the words. So just assuming that if you're doing picture books or middle grade, it's going to be easier. It's not. If the book is good, right, and an agent takes it on, and you get a book deal and you're picked up for a publication, you still have to revise it. They're still going to send you notes. And let's say they love your premise, right? They love the premise of your 40,000 word middle grade, but they want you to rewrite the whole thing. And if you think that doesn't happen, let me tell you, that absolutely happens. I've heard stories where you only keep the premise and maybe 2 characters, and you throw the whole thing out and you have to start over. That's still 40,000 more words you have to write. So be prepared. When you're, I guess, because I view it as like there's nothing wrong with being a slow writer. Like, you can just do what you need to do. If it takes you 6 years to write a 1,000-word book, George R.R. Martin, that's okay. The good work is always going to stand on its own. You will have an audience. Readers will be waiting. Your ship hasn't left the harbor. You're okay. How do you determine if your pace is healthy, slow, or career debilitating, plain old procrastinating slow? So I can only answer this question personally. And I think for me, it's definitely like my mindset. So if I sit down and I write in third person, so I channel my character's voice through my own. If I can't hear them, that's career debilitating slow. That means something is wrong. They're hiding in closets. I have to go find them. Or I'm so stressed out, or I'm so anxious, I've severed that tie to my character, and I need to fix myself before they're willing to talk to me again. Healthy slow would be I'm a little bit distracted. I keep eyeballing Twitter, and I'm like, oh, I want to be on Twitter, but I should probably write. Oh, I gotta beat word count. Okay, I'm gonna write. If I can just close my eyes, think about the scene, and just start typing, and I can really feel my character coming in and telling me what they want to say, then I know that's healthy slow. I'm just distracted, but they're ready. They're waiting for me to let them in. And then, I think that's kind of two-sided coin. So that's healthy slow and just procrastinating slow, where there's something distracting me when they're there and knocking. And so really, you just have to become acquainted with your own style and know yourself very well as a person and as a writer. Because I feel like writer Claire is very different than Claire the person. Because Claire the person is deeply lazy. Deeply in my soul lazy. Like, I will sit on the couch and turn on Netflix and not move for 2 days, kind of lazy. Like, sloth is my Patronus, kind of lazy. And yet I'm a writer. Like, and that's like a really hard active job where you're actively writing and rewriting and thinking and burning out and jumping back in. So I picked a really weird profession for myself as someone who's extremely lazy. But I had to teach myself discipline. And not just discipline as in I have to turn this book in this week, but discipline as, okay, I owe it to my plot and my characters for them to exist on the page, even if I don't get published. Like, this is something that I thought of. This is something that I'm passionate about. And I want to see this through. And as long as I still feel that way, I'm going to continue to write. Okay. Oh, okay. So it's not a question, but it's a nice comment. I'm going to read it. So thank you for overcoming your fear and doing this live session. Your personal writing story is fascinating and encouraging to me and others. Thank you, Kristen. That's so nice. Okay, question 12. Any tips on managing the anxiety of deadlines when I'm a slow writer? Deep breaths, just like I did. I think for me, I realized I need a visual representation. So if my book's due on the 31st and it's the 20th, and I can see the number of days I have in front of me, because I also have time blindness. So I have a hard time distinguishing when things are due, and I have a hard time estimating how long something will take me. So let's say if it's Wednesday and I know it's due Friday, my brain will say, you can just do it on Friday. It's fine. You have enough time. When no, I cannot write 15,000 words in one day, proofread them, and turn it in. I need the full 3 days. So I have a calendar on my wall, and I write, it's like one of those large desk calendars that are just obscenely big. I put that on my wall, and then I write in big letters, your book is due. And then I cross off each day, and I track my time with T-sheets. So I know that I'm hitting my goals and my deadlines. And then outside of that, unfortunately, I don't have any great coping skills. Mine aren't that great. I'll let you in on my big secret. I tend to have meltdowns on Twitter and on Instagram, mostly Instagram, because it deletes. If I do an Instagram stories, it deletes in 24 hours. But sometimes I just need to get it out, and I just need to say everything that's happening, all my fears, all my anxieties, get it out of my body, shoot it into the ether, or shoot it into the atmosphere, and then just forget about it. And then it's a new day, and then I start writing again. And the good thing, for me at least, I have a really good support system. So when I do things like that, my friends will see it, and my editor sees it sometimes too. But they'll immediately message me like, okay, so what do you need? How can I help you? What's going on? I will read anything you want. What's the best way to get you what you need? And I'm very lucky in that regard. But I feel like I only found those people because I was open and honest that sometimes I really do have a hard time. My anxiety absolutely gets the best of me, and it's only gotten worse as I've gotten older. And I've learned it's okay to rely on people who care about me, especially since they too probably have anxiety, and they understand what it's like when you're in that spiral because you have to turn something in and everything is going wrong in the world. Like, they're willing to help you out, and they know when they're having a problem, I'm willing to help them out. So good support system if you can find one. If you don't have a good support system, I like journaling. I use just Google Docs. I like to just do it on my phone. I'll open up a new document, and I will just write out everything that's bothering me from beginning to end. And then after I've done that, I read it a couple of times, and then I delete the document. I don't want a record of it. I just want it to be gone. And then I will do something that will help me quiet my mind, like take a bath, take a walk, listen to really soothing music while I read something. Anything I can do to get my mind off of it. And when it's time to sit down and go to work, because I have a work schedule, I sit down and I try to make sure that I'm actually ready to start writing. And if I'm not ready, I repeat the process. And if I find that it's taking too long, like I'm taking too many days where I need to center myself, that's a larger problem that I need to tell my editor about and say like, okay, I'm having a really hard time this week. Can I have an extension on my deadline? If I have an extension, what is that going to look like? Are we going to have to push the release date back? How's your calendar? Can your calendar even accommodate that? So just, again, going back to just constant communication and making sure people know that it's okay. And I think what happens is some people don't want to do that because they don't want to be a burden and be in bother, but you have to understand this is a job. You have to tell your coworkers and your business partners that you can't hold up your end and that you need some assistance. And if they have a problem with that, those aren't the people for you. Like, never be afraid to walk away. That's really important. I know a lot of times, because publishing is really hard to get into, you feel like once you're in, that's your one shot. That's all you got. If you waste this opportunity, you'll never get another one. And that's not true, because publishing isn't going anywhere. It's been around for hundreds of years, I guess, something like that. You will have time. There's always second chances. There's always pen names. There's always another entry point into publishing. once you feel like that desperation is gone, it definitely alleviates a little bit of the anxiety. If something isn't working for you, we're all too old to be unhappy. The world's too miserable for us to be unhappy. You have to do what's right for you. And if walking away is the right thing to do, walk away. Okay. Do you use any specific tools to help improve writing speed like Scrivener? I wouldn't say there aren't. I'm just slow. I'm a slow writer. There isn't anything I can do to help me be a faster writer other than my own brain getting it together and saying, we're going to write 5,000 words today, or our inspiration hits me like a bolt out of the blue and I can suddenly just go for days and days and days. That's the only thing that speeds me up. I find Scrivener is really great for organization. So if you're a slow writer because you're disorganized and it takes you 20 minutes to sort through your 15,000 Word docs to find the one plot point that you wanted to explore that you wrote a note about, then I absolutely would recommend Scrivener. Like, you need to have all of your writing outlines, drafts, plotting, character notes. If you have it all in one space, in one program, in one file, it's a lot easier to find and you get less distracted. You don't have to spend time searching for what you want to find. So Scrivener could be useful in that regard, and that it may speed you up there. But in terms of actually producing the words, I do feel like that's kind of up to you. I did hear of one trick, though, is if you write in Comic Sans, something about the way the font looks, it enables you to write faster. I've heard it work for lots of people. It doesn't work for me. I tried it. My trick is I write in blue instead of using black, double space, Times New Roman, the actual formatting for a manuscript. I write in blue Garamond with 1.5 spacing. I just love the way it looks. It's very pleasing to my eyes. And that does help me stay in the zone a little bit longer. And it keeps my attention span because it looks different. Okay, what is the slowest part of the writing process for you? I always struggle with the first draft, then speed up a little bit once I'm revising. Same. So first drafts are very difficult for me. What ends up happening is I'll write, maybe 75% of the book, and then I'll get to the end and I'm like, oh no, what happens? And this is with an outline. Okay, I'm an outliner. But what happens in my brain is I know that I'm going to just revise the beginning. So why should I write the end if I don't actually know what's going to happen? So I never actually write a full first draft. I call it a zero draft to make myself feel special. And it's usually like 50 to 75% of the book. And then I take that plus the zero draft, or take the zero draft plus the outline, just the bullet points for the end. And then I start over writing from the very beginning. And I find that goes a little bit faster if I have like a reference point. But in general, I will say drafting a brand new novel from start to finish with no writer's block and minimal distractions, 2 to 3 months, and then polished enough for me to actually send it to some of my readers or some of my friends, definitely 2 to 3 months. And then in extreme cases, I will say 6 months. But this is just YA space where I'm talking 60,000 to 75,000 words that are nice and polished and ready to go. And then what I find is their notes will make me do another draft. So from beginning to end, publishable material, probably a full year, sometimes 18 months. So that's why I cannot do a book a year and I need to do a book every 2 years, because it does take me, 18 months to have a draft ready. And then the publishing schedule is about a year or half a year to a year after you're done. Okay, so I think that's it. If there are no more questions, that's it for our session. I just want to say thank you for joining me. These are my books with my beautiful girls on the cover. This is Alice. This is Winnie. YA romance, YA contemporary. I had so much fun answering the questions and just talking to you here. I'm sorry if I use a lot of filler. Ooh, I'm a millennial. Be nice to me. Bye.